Hello, everyone, and welcome to Pizza Club's Pizza Industry Convos. I'm Michael Fox from Pizza Club. I'm joined tonight by a very special guest, Victoria Tiso from Tori Pizzeria. Victoria, welcome to Pizza Club. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
I'm excited to chat with you. I know you've been by Pizza Club a few times, but really pumped to go a little bit deeper tonight and talk about what you've been up to and about the pizzeria and just a little bit of everything. So for those who don't know you, you're from a famous pizza family, I guess you would say, Louie and Ernie's Pizza in the Bronx. And now you have your own pizzeria in Long Island. Growing up in the pizza business must have been wild. Tell us a little bit about your story, kind of growing up in the pizza world and what that was like.
I think the best part about the whole thing was just when I look back on it, it feels like it was just yesterday. I mean, I started obviously working there at 12, waiting tables, learning pretty much the whole front end of the business. And as time progressed, it was kind of like, okay, let's go and learn how to make the cheese. Let's go how to do the sauce. Let's do the dough. Like all the little things that went into the actual pizzeria. My dad always wanted us to learn because obviously it was pivotal to if an employee never showed up or just pivotal to the overall experience of owning a pizzeria. I mean, from when we were young, we were rolling dough. Although we wanted to play with it, we didn't understand it, but we had a lot of fun. But as time went on, obviously moving up, going to college, coming back, working for my dad, I was like, hey, you know what? I just don't want to be a waitress anymore. Learning how to do the whole entire thing. It was definitely a really good time. It's definitely hard.
And you said you kind of were playing with dough at an early age, but when did you make your pizza that was served to a customer? Do you remember?
About 6 years ago.
Really? That was the first time you served a customer in Louie and Ernie's?
Yeah, it was making an actual pizza and serving it to someone was about 6 years ago now.
Okay.
It took some time.
Going up, was there a lot of pressure?
I think there was a lot of pressure because my dad was always one of the fastest. He was the best there. So everyone knew him. I mean, he grew up himself in the pizza industry, working at a young age for Ernie, the original owner of Louie and Ernie's. So he had big shoes to fill himself. And I was kind of like following along in his footsteps a little bit, being like, well, if he's not there, I have to be the next best version of him. That's what people are expecting. They're expecting the same consistency, the quality, and overall product. So, I mean, I learned from him everything that I know, but at the same time, I had to pretty much recreate it, which is the hardest part. And it took a lot of time and effort, but it was at least one full year of him really watching me and pretty much pushing my buttons to see if I was going to be able to crack under pressure and really sustain to his idea of quality.
What do you think was the hardest part about learning something that you grew up with? Like the process of making a New York style pizza with sausage. And I mean, talk a little bit about the process of learning something that you knew so well.
I mean, it's one thing to watch, right? So like my whole entire life, I'm watching it going, you're just putting sauce, you're just putting cheese. Like, what's so hard about it? But then when I actually had to do it, I was like, wow, this isn't that easy. The dough that we use is super light, so we make it really thin. We want it crispy, a lot of water, the hydration, making sure it's not getting stuck to the peel. So there was a lot of things for me and my height. I'm only 5 foot. So I had to learn how to stand on my toes and put pizza in the oven and learn that my calves are going to be burning. And all the little things that were harder for me that I never realized were so easy to them. So even the cheese to sauce ratio, something that I just thought like a ladle of sauce and a handful of cheese. And I'm sitting, my first pie was so much cheese. My dad's like, that's an extra cheese pie. And I'm like, oh. So it's cool to be like on the outsider looking in and being like, oh, this is easy. But then as I was doing it, I really had to learn what it takes to actually make pizza, not just put anything on the peel and throw it in the oven.
It's probably all these little details that you didn't even realize existed until you actually got into the weeds of it, right? Like you said, the sauce to cheese ratio, this is always there. You just probably didn't know it as a concept fully fleshed out until you had to make it, I guess, from scratch.
Like I needed to even figure out if I was a lefty or a righty. I'm so ambidextrous with everything I do in life. Like my dad's a lefty. So my whole life I've been watching him make pizza lefty, reaching across, getting a peel, like everything has been done. So now I'm like, well, what am I? Am I a righty? Am I a lefty? So I kind of was experimenting even with that, trying to be like, all right, I got to find balance. I have to find what works for me, what doesn't. it would definitely took a long time for me. And sometimes I still use both hands. I'm like, we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I was curious, like, is there anything that you tried to change in terms of the pizza or any process while you were there at Louie and Ernie's, or was that like just a no-go, or you just didn't want to because you want to kind of preserve that legacy? I'm curious, like, was there any conversation about any minor tweaks at all to the pizza?
I think my dad valued a lot of the things that I had to say, but you can't teach an old dog new tricks. So that was one of the hardest things. I would definitely present certain things to him. He has a business partner, which was my uncle. So it was always hard because the two of them have just been doing something for so long. We do make a Godfather pie, which has like sausage, pepperoni, onions, and peppers. I found that they always used to put the pepperoni on the bottom of the pizza. I felt that it was a little more oilier there, like really oily. I found that cooking the pepperoni above the vegetables didn't make it as oily. So I kind of changed that along the way. They didn't really bat an eye at it. I don't think they noticed because I would do it really quickly. But in regards to everything else there, I kind of really tried to keep it the same. The only thing I really added over time was just like simple things like social media and a website. But the actual recipes, I always stayed like true to what they taught me, because at that point, it's not gonna really make or break me as a person. It was just really following along with what they wanted, and it worked forever. So why change it?
Yeah, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But I'm sure there are certain things you learned along the way, and lessons that you took with you, or things that you wanted to change on your own, which we'll get into it in a second. But I wanted to kind of go back a little bit, because you grew up in the pizza business, you left the pizza business, you went off to coach softball, right?
Correct.
And work in athletics, and then you got sucked back into pizza. Like, so let's just talk about that, because you came back to Louie and Ernie's and then obviously went on now to start your shop. So what was the moment in which you realized that you haven't really left pizza all along, you're coming back? Like, what was that moment like for you?
For me, I was always working somewhat at the pizzeria, whether it was at like, the waitress level, helping out. I ended up going full time working at a college. I was down at Baruch College. They had sent me at that point to Atlanta. I was at a women in leaders conference. I'm sitting there in a room full of like millions of women, and I'm like, okay, I'm here. I'm doing athletics. Where am I going in life? And I kind of felt like I'm sitting there, and every single person in the room was just saying like how they were a pioneer in the sports industry. And I was flipping through my Instagram. I'm like, all right, I've heard this story 100 times already this weekend. And I was like, maybe I can go back and just do pizza. And it was just something like the light bulb went off. I'm like, look at all these women in a room that were pioneers of their time, that it was a male, very dominant world, college athletics. And now you're seeing the progression throughout the years. And I'm like, maybe pizza will eventually get to that. And it did. And it did very quickly. So I'm in Atlanta, and I said, I'm going home and I'm quitting my job. And I'm going to go back and I'm going to work for my dad. And if I go back, though, I'm going to learn how to make pizza. I'm not going to be a waitress anymore. I'm going to do everything. And I'm eventually going to leave and open my own place. That was the goal. Because I knew, like I said before, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. The place has been there 100 moons. So I was like, you know what? If I'm going to do it, I want to learn every style that I possibly can. I want to create my own recipes, staying true to the roots, but then put my own flair on life and see where it goes. And be able to have the adaptability of being whatever I want in the pizza world. So that day in Atlanta, me leaving, I literally got on the plane. I said, all right, I'm going home to quit my job. And about a week and a half later, I was gone. I was back at the pizzeria, and I said to my dad, I'm like, all right, I'm back. He's like, for real? He's like, you gave up that dream? And I was like, it's not that I gave up the dream. It's just I put one to bed for a little bit. I did it. But now it's time to, hone in on the other.
And that's really interesting. And so you had this career, you kind of decided, okay, I'm going to go back to pizza. Were you making pizzas while you were not in the pizza shop, or like, were you tinkering with dough? Was that something you were doing between kind of growing up and coming back to Louie and Ernie's? Was that something you did? No,
I was
not
doing
at all.
nothing. I was just waitressing. I was always, I was there, but like we said before, I was never making pizza.
Right.
It was just kind of learning how to run the shop, basic inventory, really managerial, but nothing of the sorts of like when I went back. I was really, truly an employee, just figuring it out and trying to really make it in the college athletic world. I was not. Pizza was always in me. Like, I was always talking to my dad about it, but it was never like, I'm going to go and make pizza.
So when you got back to the shop, that was really when you started to learn pizza and then also maybe form some opinions on what you liked about making a pizza. Talk a little bit about the process of evolution from making that famous Louie and Ernie's pizza to like coming up with your own idea of pizza, right? You were formed with this pizza that's so famous, but yet how do we get Tori Tiso out of that? What is that process like? Let us peek inside. I'm curious to know.
So the first thing that I started doing was I was going to every pizzeria of all these lists that comes out, like any list that was out. Because I mean, the lists for us started in, I think it was like 2004. The New York Times came out with like the top places to go in the 5 boroughs. And then it progressed. And then as time went on, these past 20 years, I mean, the lists have grown, the places have opened. And my goal was to try to go to as many places as I possibly can, keep
Smart.
notes about all of them, and then see what I liked and disliked, what I would change. And I started becoming like my own little pizza critic before food blogging was even a thing, because I would call my friends and I'd be like, hey, what are you guys doing? Do you want to go here? Do you want to go there? And they'd be like, why? Your dad's never going to let you do any of that. And I'm like, one day I'll do mine, one day. So it's kind of like this little book of all these places that I went to started to come to life. So you know what? I like the pepperoni cups from Prince Street. I like the whole idea of like barbecue chicken from another place. So it was like all these places always would resonate and like come back to me. And it would be like late night at Louie and Ernie's. And then I'd try to recreate them when no one was watching. So it would be, it was cool to see as time was going on. Like I was making my own menu in my head, but I was always going out and trying new places and seeing what liked and I disliked. Even though Louie and Ernie's was like so basic, we added bacon, it was like the world ended, you know? So it was like, but as I'm going out there and I'm trying new places and I'm writing everything down that I liked and didn't like, I'm like, okay, well, maybe one day I could do this somewhere where I want to do it. So it's kind of like I was making my own recipe book in the back of my head based off of solely the places that I went to off those lists. And I think now I've gone to almost all the iconic pizzerias you could possibly think of because I just love pizza and I love going and trying things out. And what works for one person might not work for another, but that was part of doing the homework and the experimenting that I was doing at the time.
That's really fun. They soak us through the timeline of like you kind of departing Louie and Ernie's and making plans to open your own shop because now you've got this like recipe arsenal in the back of your head, I guess.
Yeah. So the book was actually just coming to an end and I'm like, all right, what do I do now? I found myself that I was reading a lot of like the Pizza Today magazines and I'm reading them and I always would go to the recipe page and I was always checking out what was going on. And I'm like, all right, how long does this book have to be for me to just leave? Right. So I can't just up and go. It's my dad. I know there has to be like a timeline. He at the time was also enjoying his life. He knew he had me. He groomed me at that point. I mean, I was doing crazy hours, but I wanted to be there. And that was his thing. He's like, I still want you to have a life. And I'm like, no, like I need to just keep doing this because I need to know if I want to do it. And that was my thing. Like being an owner and an operator is totally different than being a worker. When you're a worker, you put your head down and you go to work the next day and that's it. But being an owner, the problems come home with you. So at that point, me being there 6-7 days a week, I was like, you know what? If I can do this for weeks on end, then I could be an owner. So I took that book in the back of my head and I was like, all right. I told them on June 1st, I said, I'm getting ready to leave. They're like, when are you leaving? And I said, my last day is October 1st. So it gave them all summer. It gave me time. It gave me enough to start looking for pizzerias. I'm not going to lie. I looked at least 100 pizzerias. I was all over the place and I could not pick a location. I was like, I don't want Westchester. Then I didn't want the city. Then I didn't want Long Island. Like I was toying back and forth between so many different places. And I was like, it's just going to come to me. One of these days, it's just going to feel like home and I'll sign the deal. Like, and that's it. But it was almost like finding a college. I had to see, like, did I like the town? Did I like and there was like the simplest things. I walk in a place and if I didn't like the wallpaper on the walls, I'm like, nope, don't do it. Can't see it. Like, I don't want it. So it took me from June 1st to October 1st to really find the place. And then by mid-October, I was lost because I'm like, well, now I left. What do I do? My first day off, me and my mom went to the zoo. I mean, like, I totally did not know what to do with myself whatsoever. But I just kind of was like, all right, I found the place in Long Island. Like, I'm going to go. I didn't think it was going to take as long as it did, but I'm thankful that it did because that allowed me to go work for another pizzeria in the interim.
Okay, so yeah, so wild story. So 100 pizzerias, that is quite a process. So where did you wind up working in between, and talk a little bit about that process? I'm sure that was seeing it through a whole new set of eyes on how to make pizza.
Well, yeah, I mean, my time working for my dad was, you're working for your dad. So I reached out to this guy first on Instagram that was making wood-fired pizza on a pizza truck. And I was like, hey, I want to learn this style. And he kind of like taught me everything about wood-fired pizza. So I was like, all right, hey, this is awesome. And I went down to Charleston with him on his truck and I learned how to do the wood fire. And I was even toying with like bringing that style of, pizza back, learning how different the dough is, the hydration, everything was different. Everything that I knew, I just opened the window and threw it out. I had no skin in the game because I'm like, I've been making New York style for so long. And now you stick me in Neapolitan and the guy's like, come on, let's add oil, let's do this. And I'm like, what's happening? Like bulk ferment. I mean, crazy words I had never thought of in a million years. I was like, this is no longer Louie and Ernie. He's like, I wanted to clap my feet and end up back home. And I'm like, all right, well, I reached out. Now I got to learn, right? So I had to change hats rather quickly. And I'm in Charleston. I come back home and I find out that the deal's going to take even longer. I'm like, now what do I do? I'm like, great. I learned Neapolitan. I've learned Louie and Ernie's, which now I'm all messed up. And I live in Pelham. So there's a place called Pizza Finiche in Pelham, opens up.
Yeah.
And I see it. I pass by it a gazillion times. I'm across the street at this TD Bank. And I'm like, I'm going to write to this guy on Instagram. I'm going to see, and sure enough, he's a Bronx guy. So I'm like, all right, Bronx guy in Pelham, new pizzeria. Let's see what it's all about. I go in there. I see these thick, I thought it was a Sicilian. I'm like, this thing looks amazing. I'm like, that a cheese crust? So I get two bites and I'm like, this is phenomenal. But now I can't be like that person and be like, oh yeah, like, can I work for you? Like, I couldn't do that. So like time progressed, I went home and I did the most, iconic thing. I slid in the DM and I'm like, hey, my name is Victoria Tiso. I, just wondering by any chance, like, you looking for somebody to work for you? And he's like, are you the Louie and Ernie's kids? And I'm like, yeah, I'm not working for my dad right now. And he was like a little skeptical about it. And he's like, listen, if you're here on Tuesday, he's like, you can come here, you can work for me until you get up on your feet, whatever you need to do. So I went in and I told John, I was like, hey, John, listen, like, I'm going to open my own pizzeria. It's just a matter of time. I don't know when. I'm still like in, the trial and error phase right now of like the lease. But eventually I will leave and I will go. And he was like, all right. He's like, are you willing to learn? I was like, yeah. He goes, all right, I'll teach you everything I need. Like, I'll teach you. I'm like, okay, cool. He's like, but one thing. I was like, okay. Like, I'm scared. Once again, I'm working for somebody that isn't my dad. Right. So I'm like, okay. And he was like, just listen. Don't talk over me. Just listen. I'm like, okay. I'm like, is that it? That's all I got to do? And he was like, that's it. And I was like, all right. Because at that point, I know what I brought to the table, like, of experience. But now you're dealing with somebody who's a world pizza champion, who's taking you in, who has the most amount of... I went from not knowing what hydration was to listening to a man that could tell you everything and anything about pizza. And I was fascinated. Absolutely fascinated. Because I'm like, if I didn't know anything before, I'm going to learn something here. So every minute that he spoke, I just wanted to be a sponge. I didn't want to speak unless I had a question. And even when I had a question, I didn't want to overstep because I didn't want him to stop. So, it was for me, it was a very eye-opening moment because for a while I was losing a lot of confidence within myself because everybody else just seems to be way much further than I was in my career with athletics, everyone I felt was higher in what I was doing with pizza, or it was like kind of like being passed up on. So I was like, you know what? I'm like, this guy's restoring everything that I needed. And the 5.5 months I was there, I always say I wish I had more time, because John's the type of person where it was like, as long as you put your head down and go to work and you bring the same energy every single time, it's just two people that love work and love pizza. So it's like I took that and kind of ran with it.
That's amazing. You lucked out with a great pizzeria in your neighborhood in Pelham, John Cristina, of course, from Pizza Finiche. And yeah, I mean, John's a great teacher and in some ways had a similar path in that he had went away from pizza, came back to pizza. I guess he can relate to that story a bit. So that's really cool.
Yeah, so I took him, I took the wood fireplace, I obviously took Louie and Ernie's. I put everything into that book and was like, all right, March it is. And I left in March and opened my place on March 25th, and it took off.
That's fantastic. And was that the first time you ever had a Detroit pizza? Was it in Pizza Finiche, or was it? Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, my first time ever.
Wow. Well, Detroit's not big here in New York. It's not until recently, or more recently, that would you see it at all. I mean, growing up, that wasn't available here, really, right? So it's not surprising. But now,
yeah, the second place that I tried that was Detroit style, I was at the Barstool Pizza Festival, and my dad's place was there, and we shared a tent with Aces.
okay.
And Aces was down there making Detroits, and that was the second time I had it. So the first time was at John's, and that was the second. And I was like, two different styles, two different worlds, but very good.
Yeah, no, Aces is great too, and they're in Brooklyn, from Brooklyn now. Now I have multiple locations. So you got your training, you got March, you're open. What was the process like of figuring out the pizzas you're going to sell? Because I know you're not doing one style, you're doing many styles. So how did you kind of decide on those styles? And side note, working with John Cristina probably did not help the fact that you were going to have multiple styles coming on board, because I know he's dabbling in many styles as well. So that must have been, I'm sure that was an influence, I would imagine, on that process.
John was definitely like lighting a fire under me to be like, think outside the box. What do you want to put on a pizza? What do you want to do as a recipe? Like anything that would come to mind, he'd be like, let's do it. Like I was toying with the idea of like deep frying these little like Tori pockets, we were calling them. Like we were doing crazy things, just trying to make things work. And like, but it made my creative like mind, like I said, from just being like large pie, pepperoni pie, sausage pie, the most basic stuff, to now thinking I'm like, wait a minute, I just watched him take prosciutto, roll it up in fresh mozzarella, put it on a pie. I was watching him make crazy things, and I'm like, people are going nuts for this. I'm like, and if you do it right, he say all the time, if you do it right, you could put whatever you want. Like, just make sure it's good. Being there definitely helped make me become more creative. And then on top of going to all those places. So I would sit, it was really in about January. It took me about 3 months to get the menu where I wanted to be. John would be like, come on, show me the menu. Let's go. Show me the menu. And I'd be like, yeah, a couple more days. Because I wanted to take all the styles that I learned, and I wanted to take all the toppings that I had and really try to hone in on what I wanted. So like I picked my top 6 Detroits that I wanted to do, and I picked my New York style. And then I said, you know what? Okay, what do I want to do with the grandmas? Do I want them to be a par bake? Do I not? And for over some time, like I was kind of dabbling with both, because John was teaching me how to do a par baked grandma. I was looking at other places online that weren't doing that. So then I'm going to Long Island, where it's like, the grandma capital of the world, practically. Everyone's going to be judging you on it. So I'm like, I kind of want to do something my way. So I'm like, can I kind of make it a hybrid? Can I cook it halfway and then do it again? So like every single thing that I was doing was just trying to find my own way. Am I using a plum tomato? Am I adding onions? Am I not? Am I going to put a ton of garlic? Every place that I was going out there, I felt was being completely overran by garlic. So I tried to back the garlic out of mine a little bit, because I wanted it to taste a bit sweeter. But that was for me. So it was, as time progressed and I was trying to make these menus come to light, I was still kind of like really I still tinker with it a little bit, because you're still trying to find what works best for you. And being a new shop like that, I kind of like, I had no expectation. I was like, I can kind of do whatever I want as long as I stay true to my roots and what I've learned and not go too rogue. I should be okay.
I think that's a good attitude. And talk a little bit more about the styles that you've incorporated now, like so just so people have an understanding of your menu, because it is, yeah, you've got a lot of stuff going on.
So I do a New York standard thin crust pie. It's cooked well done, not really crispy, golden brown at the bottom. I do a Sicilian. I do a grandma. My Sicilians are par baked. My grandma's now, I don't par bake anymore. I just kind of get them going in a pan. Take a little bit longer to cook, but the product seems to be coming out well. I do calzones, which I deep fry them like we did at Louie and Ernie's. I also bake them. And then I have my Detroits, which I do as a par bake, that have been like my signature thing of being out on the island. They're definitely one of my top sellers.
It sounds like the Detroit's is like the big seller now. What would you say that that's the majority of the business, or is it kind of a mixed bag?
I think right now I would say it's probably 60% Detroit, 40% round. And the 40% is kind of like give or take. It really depends on the week. I always notice that people always wanted to try the Detroits, and this one would be like, it's not for me. Like, oh, it's too thick, or it's not, I don't like too much cheese. So it's definitely going based off of like the personal preference. But I definitely see that people love the Detroits. And I also think it's because it's new. There's not a lot of places out here doing it, especially in Long Island. So that kind of plays a big factor into it. Grandmas, like I said, Long Island's kind of like played out for them right now. People always, pay tribute. And then the New York style too. I'll be very honest. I've been to a decent amount of like Long Island pizzerias now. There's some pretty bad ones that are serving New York style, but they're not cooked. So I think people sometimes are a little bit leery. They'll be like, yeah, they all taste the same. And I'm like, they don't though, because they are all different in their own way. But I like to cook my pizza, and I feel like sometimes they're as white as this shirt. So it's a little tough to, get people to have the regular pizza. Sometimes I think they just go directly to the Detroits because it's new. But I definitely would say it's like 60-40. And I'll say my dad's sausage pizza, which is primarily known for being one of the best, if not in New York City. I bring the sausage out to Long Island. So we're seeing a dramatic pickup of the sausage, whether it be the Detroit style or plain now, because nobody's using that out on the island.
Right. So you're basically taking that, you're kind of borrowing that ingredient from Louie and Ernie's to make Tori pizza. Not to compare the two, but I know exactly what you're talking about though when you see like that white pizza on the counter in a Long Island pizzeria. How would you say the difference is between your pizza and the OG Louie and Ernie's pizza in terms of the cook time, I guess, or the colorization maybe?
Yeah, my oven man is phenomenal, but it took a long time for him to understand that brown is not burnt. Brown is cooked. Like there was definitely, I tell him all the time, there's black, there's brown, and there's golden brown, and then there's white. I don't want it to be white. I want it to be golden brown. And I was like, golden brown for a sliced pie was always what my dad used to say when I was working the oven. Golden brown, golden brown. I hear him all in my sleep. And then if it was a sausage pie, you want to make sure it's cooked because we're using fresh sausage, obviously right out of the casing. Don't want anyone to get sick. So he would be like, all right, a next layer up from golden brown is like a dark brown. So obviously we're trying to find the balance between the two. If it's a sliced pie, it's going to be golden brown. If it's sausage, it should be cooked more. But that's the style because you want it to be fresh and you want it to be obviously safe to eat. Anything darker than that is very well done to most people, especially on the island. I've learned that if they see anything that is not, 50 shades of white, they think it's burnt. So, you're training the customer at that point to like a different style of pizza or live life a little on the edge with some flavor. But it's definitely, I think the crispiness is there. Like I'm not going to lie, like I've compared the two. The crispiness is there. Obviously the nostalgia just of the ovens of Louie and Ernie's alone, that's turned millions of pies over. The oil is definitely always going to play a factor into it, but I definitely have seasoned these ovens very quickly out here. The pizzeria that was here before me had the ovens for 30 years themselves, so they're very well cooked. But I think between the two, you're definitely going to get the same consistency, crispiness, but It's just, something's always going to be different. It's like that, that New York water. I say all the time to people, I'm like, it's the closest you're going to get without paying the toll. Oh, it's the same sauce, same sausage, same cheese. Everything is as close as you're going to get it. The same recipes. It's just close your eyes and you're in a new place.
Is your dough formulation different? You've learned so much about other pizzas. Talk a little bit about the process for making the dough at Tori Tiso.
The biggest thing I had to learn was that the humidity, everything changed. Being in a basement at Louie and Ernie's, the heat kind of like stayed in one spot. It was always hot. So the dough would rise so much faster because you had nowhere for the heat to escape. Now I'm dealing with, big 12-foot ceilings, and I had to learn how to redo all my dough because everything that worked there didn't work for me. I had the first 6 weeks, my Sicilian was coming out hard as a rock and I couldn't figure it out. The Detroits weren't rising. Everything that I learned was kind of like, open the window, throw it out, and start over. And for me, it was just, you're realizing the humidity, the water, the overall. I mean, even now at night, I have the heat set at 83 because it's too cold, at night. But the temperature was one of my biggest things. And I said, I'm not in a basement anymore. Heat's rising, but it's not rising in my favor. It's not, being in the dungeon is no longer a thing. So 6-foot ceilings, 12, even how my pizza men like to, because I'm not the only one making pizza. My pizza men like tighter dough because that Long Island flour, I don't know what they were using out here. It was tough. So I said to them, listen, we have to find balance. It's not going to be tough. It's not going to be hard. It's not going to be soft, but we have to be like in the middle because the longer that you want this to be this tight, it's not going to work. It's not going to, there's too many bubbles. It's cold, the dough. I wanted it to be at room temperature so it cooked properly. So all of these things that were becoming new, like to them, were things of the past for me, but I had to make it work in Long Island.
Yeah, it's a process, I'm sure, to get there, but it sounds like you figured out you're getting there, or you've got there with.
We've definitely gotten there over time. Like I said, it took really the first 6 weeks to gravitate. Like I said, the Sicilians being hard as a rock, the Detroit's not rising. I was freaking out, but that was just me tinkering. Okay, a little less water, a little more yeast, figuring out the temperature, even bringing in a humidifier. I mean, I was doing everything at that point to try to figure out what was working. Changed every filter, called the HVAC company to make the place colder. I put in a brand new refrigerator. Like, I was doing everything to make sure that the dough recipe was trying to stay as true as I could to what I've learned, but at the same time making sure that I was still putting out a good quality product.
No, it's tough. I mean, there's a lot of variables, and dialing that in is, I'm sure, the big challenge. And, going back to Detroit for a second, we'll talk about educating Long Island customers about Detroit, because it sounds like they've come around, but that must have been an interesting process to get there. What was that like? And how did you get through it?
Everyone calls it every city but the city of Detroit. Or, like they'll be like, oh, can I have a Philly special? Can I have a Chicago? Can I have, and I'm like, boy. But and everyone thought it was a Sicilian at first. And they still call it a Sicilian. I try to educate them on like what the difference is. And the best thing I could say to them constantly is, it's like a Sicilian and a grandma had a baby. It's not too thick. It's not too skinny. You're trying to find the balance between the two because that's the only way they understand out there. Sicilian and grandma. So they're like, oh, we'll give it a shot. So is it like a Sicilian? I'm like, it's got the cheese consistency of a Sicilian, but then it's got the crispiness of a grandma. So, you got to try to find a way to level with them a bit. And my first couple of weeks was everyone calling it a Sicilian. And then I said to them, I was like, just try it. And I'm like, do you like cheese? Because the cheese crust is everything, like you get that crown around the edge and people see it and it's really appealing. So, my big thing was try it out, see if you like it, see. And for me, I learned obviously working with John, like you don't want it to be too dense. I didn't want it to be too dense. I wanted it to be lighter. I didn't want it to be a belly bomb because I wanted people to enjoy it. There is a lot of cheese on it. So if I put a lot of cheese, then maybe they don't want to eat the whole thing. They don't want to feel like so full. So I started making it more of like almost like a focaccia bread, making it really light, airy, a good amount of texture to it, making sure that it's cooked crispy, but also not feeling like, you're bloated or you're having too much that could kill you. And that's what people like. They like the consistency of like, oh, it's not as heavy as a Sicilian. It's not too light like a grandma. Like they found the balance, and all I know is people love taking pictures of them. So kind of like once it was that, I was like, oh, can I have that upside down Sicilian? And I'm like, boy, it's a Detroit. But people became really receptive to it, and they enjoy it because, like I said, it's not out there that often. So for them to try something new was very hard. But everybody who has tried it, I think I've only met like 3 people who don't like it. So, and that's pretty fair.
It's
For
a
all the
pretty good
people that
track
have been
record.
out there, it's not too bad.
Yeah. I don't know what it is about Long Island pizza. Like, I think maybe people turn off their brains a little bit when they go to a pizzeria, because the pizzerias kind of have the same thing. And it's like, you don't really have to do much thinking, right? You're like, I want a cheese or I want a Sicilian, right? Like it's just there. So now it's like, whoa, wait, what is this thing with cheese and a wall? And I don't like.
A lot of people will say like, oh, wow, you have a lot of variety. And I'm like, yeah, because it's not your typical pizza place anymore. And the place that I bought, quite frankly, he was just a very no frills, no thrills guy. Plain pepperoni, Sicilian, grandma, that's it. So when you go and you change someplace that's been like that for 30 plus years, of course people are going to have like, a little bit of a pushback or kind of concerns. But that's why I started off small with like a couple of Sicilians trying it out, a couple of grandmas, and then really pushing the Detroits and trying people, just saying like, hey, just try it out. Giving a free sample every now and then for something new isn't the worst thing in the world.
No, I think sampling is a great way to get people involved in a new
Especially
thing.
when it's something new.
Yeah. And especially in your market.
Yeah, people love pizza and they love food. So it's like, you might as well give them something good.
Yeah, exactly.
And when people post it, it looks so good to eat. People eat with their eyes now anyway. So it became like, just like I said, it started off something really small, and now we went from 25 Detroits a day. We could do up to almost close to 100. So it's crazy how the Detroit world has took over.
Amazing. And like, what is one of the things that you learned that you just from opening your own store, things that you came across, like, wow, that I wasn't expecting that, or that kind of smacked me in the face a little bit. But what is that biggest takeaway right now or learning?
I mean, I've been quoted saying that no one's ever going to save me, which is really true. I mean, it's all on you. But I think I always say now, like, jump and the net will appear. Like, you just got to like kind of like see where life takes you. I mean, every day I'm learning something new, whether I'm learning something with banking. I mean, my dad gave me the keys, to success. He was like, hey, this is how we're going to do it. But there was a lot of variables that I didn't understand. Louie and Ernie's, we never took credit cards. I learned real quick what 3% was. I learned real quick, how to do a refund, like things that I never knew before. Delivery, never delivered. All of these things, at going to Restaurant Depot at the crack of dawn, dealing with different vendors. Like we used the same vendor for 100 years. Like we didn't know any better. So for me, it's just been becoming more adaptable and really trying to like find my rhythm in being an owner. And like operating and making pizza was 2 different worlds, because now everything falls on me. Yeah, I could put the pizza in the oven, but like this week, okay, sales tax is due, reality's hitting in, taxes are due, rent. So all of those things kind of were just like, all right, you could do it. And I was a firm believer that I was not going to make it anybody else's problem but mine. Opening a business was my choice. I don't ask anybody for help unless I really need to. My dad retired. He did his time. He does not need to save me. My mom does not need to do my books. My mom, I don't try to bother anybody with my job and my career because it falls on me. I chose this life. So, that's been the hardest part of just really balancing it all out, is just realizing I'm my own person. I can make pizza. I can operate. Then I could be successful. And it's just really keeping myself afloat. That's it. Keeping my head above water and just realizing you have to take each day as it comes, one day at a time, one bill at a time, and just keep pushing, because everybody else is counting on you to fail. So it's in a world now where people watch everything on social media, there's so many people out there that do want to help you, even if you do feel alone. I don't want to bother anybody, but it doesn't mean I'm alone. So, the accessibility of being able to reach out to others, whether it's having somebody that, you've worked with before, or maybe somebody that you admire through their work ethic. There's so many options now. So for me, it's just been like, you know what? Take each day as it comes and see where it goes. Learn, keep learning. Because if you stop learning, you're done. You're dead. That should be the last day you learn anything.
I love that. And, speaking of community, I know you're involved with Women in Pizza.
Yeah.
So I'd love to talk a little bit about that. How is having a community of female pizza makers through Women in Pizza, what has that been like for you? And how has that been a part of your journey?
I think it's been awesome because that was really seeing women on my Instagram timeline. And I just said this the other day. The first two people I saw on my Instagram timeline making pizza was Laura Meyer, and I saw Georgia, who I got to meet last March. And I'm looking forward to Laura. I'm getting ready to meet her in Vegas. She actually wrote to me today, like saying, reach out, like, I want to see you. Like, so I think that's really cool because those were the first two women that I really saw on my Instagram, like, feed making pizza. Obviously, one being in my backyard, another one being from California working for Tony. So it's really cool to have been from the outsider perspective, like being like, those people did it, I can do it too, because those were the first two I saw. And then as time went on, like I said, I saw Audrey. I started seeing more and more women pop up, and obviously algorithms and things popping on your Instagram feeds, and you're seeing more and more women, obviously, in the magazines. So for me, Women in Pizza has really been, it's a pivotal part of my career because I would have never saw those people if it wasn't for that Instagram page and if it wasn't for, everything that they're doing for us. And that's why I'm like a big advocate for it because, like I said, there would be no me. Yeah, maybe I would have been still coaching, but to see other women out there doing it kind of gave me the like courage and like the leap of faith, being like, hey, you know what? You can do this. Who cares you're 5 foot and you can't put the pizza in the oven? You'll figure it out. I'm sure you're not the first and not the last. But now I see so many people reaching out to me being like, you're inspirational. Like, you have no idea. I love following your story. Like, keep going. Don't stop. Like, I'm here for you. Like, and that's the real cool part about it. That's what I love about Women in Pizza. Because no matter where we are now, like I said, the accessibility and being one click, one phone call away is really cool. And I'm going to Vegas in a couple of weeks. And I'm so excited because there's so many people I want to meet. And they're like celebrities to me. And yeah, you know what? It's so cliche because it's like the pizza world. But I'm like, these are people you look up to. I mean, I was in Vegas 2.5 years ago. I rose my hand. I went to the Women in Pizza panel and Laura was on there. There was a few women and I remember her answering my question directly. And I was like, should I stay at my father's pizzeria that's been an institution or do I go out on my own? And she said, well, you have to do what you want to do, So that was, and it really made me think like, where do I want to see myself in a couple of years? Where do I want to be? And now to sit here and like, I don't know, see where I'm at now is crazy. Because 2 years ago, I would have never thought I'd be in the position I'm in now. And now I'm going back, getting ready to meet her and be like, hey, you know what? When I sat there on that panel watching you, listening to you, she had just opened her pizzeria.
Right.
I remember her literally pulling a luggage through saying, I got to get back. That was the last thing she did. She said, I have to get back to my pizzeria. She had just opened.
Yeah, I remember.
Said, wow, that's wild. She flew here, got here, opened the pizzeria, and is on her way out the door. And I'm about to do the exact same thing. So it's just cool to see how like it's come full circle and you never know in life like what you're going to remember and what you're going to take out of it. But I'm very, very, very supportive of the Women in Pizza and anybody out there that's like trying to do it, whether at-home pizza maker, they're trying to build their empire, whatever it is, I'm proud of all of them.
That's amazing. Really, truly full circle. And I'm excited for you to come out to Pizza Expo. Tori, I know we got to wrap up here, but any other words of wisdom or things you want to leave us with?
I mean, if anyone's out there looking to open their own pizzeria, take a dabble at it, whether male, female, whatever the case may be, just get out there and do it. Like I said, the last day you want to be, the last day you stop learning is the day you die. So keep educating yourself. Go out there, learn as many things as you possibly can, become creative and become your own person. And that's what's going to make you your brand. You being you, putting out the best quality product that you can is the best authenticity that you can. Like, that just be you. Be you, have fun, and let the pizza speak for itself. Consistency is everything, but you got to have heart, you got to have passion, and you got to love what you do. And if you're not loving what you do, then you know what? It's not for you. So just have fun, eat pizza, enjoy it, and see where life takes you. That's the best thing I can say to anybody.
Well said. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate your time here tonight. And before we go, real quick, how can people find you on social media? What's the best way to
Absolutely.
connect?
So the business is Tori_T's TS Pizzeria. I also have my own personal Instagram page. I'm the Bronx Pizza Girl. Although I'm no longer in the Bronx, I feel like I was the only pizza girl in the Bronx. So it's just, my own way. So many people are like, oh, are you going to change it? No. Like that, it will always be a part of me. The pizzeria, the history, everything about it. I'll always be the Bronx Pizza Girl. So that's my other handle. But that's the best ways to find me.
Awesome. 100%. Yeah, don't change it.
Never.
Tori, again, thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate you being here. This has been Pizza Industry Convos, part of the Pizza Club Network. Make sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can find us on Instagram, I Need Pizza Club, and we'll see you next week. Thanks again, Tori. Have a good night.
No problem. Thank you.